Hello everyone, welcome to this week's Meet at Chi Alpha. I am Mercer Martin, your host, and this week we are going to meet Grant Belchamber. Alright, Grant, why don't you share with everyone the basics? We've had everyone share your year, your major, what you're thinking about doing when you graduate, and your hometown.
So my name is Grant. I am a freshman. I'm an English major with a political science minor that I'm probably going to get rid of. My hometown is Valley Park. It's about 15 minutes out from here, right by Baldwin and Kirkwood. And after I graduate, I plan on going to some form of grad school, probably English grad school. But
Nice. So you're a freshman. I think you're the first freshman I've interviewed. So whose small group are you in?
I am in Mercer small group and Kenny Owens.
Nice. And how did you get into Chi Alpha in the first place?
I've known Kenny for a long time, probably about 4 years, and when I showed up at SLU, I tried out a couple different study groups, and I landed in Chi Alpha.
Nice.
And I really enjoyed it.
I'm sorry that he had to be your connecting point, but you found me, so that's, I'm sure, made up for his shortfalls. But anyways, so Grant, you're an English major, so I assume you like reading, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what is, like, I don't want to say your favorite book ever. What's a book that's been impactful recently to you?
Recently, I think the one I just finished yesterday, actually, Coming Up for Air by George Orwell. It's about a middle-aged man. He's about 45, and he has a wife and kids that he hates, and he's an insurance salesman, and he's just living the mediocre, everyday life, and he makes a little bit of money on the side that he keeps hidden from his wife. And then he decides to go spend a week back in his childhood hometown, and this was right before World War II, and it's just not impactful to him, as he thought it would be, and he realizes that the world has changed and there's nothing he can do to stop it. So I've really been working through that.
Wow. Deep, meaningful. Would you recommend it to us?
I would recommend it.
Okay, sweet. George Orwell, if you want some dystopian nightmares, go for it. Okay, so what did you do this summer? Like, where did you work?
I worked at Emo's Pizza, probably about 35 hours a week, and then I just hung out over the summer.
Okay, I'm not from St. Louis, but I love Emo's Pizza. Like, number one, always pick it. Settled a debate for us. Like, is Provel all it's made out to be?
Provel is all it's made out to be. I stole a bag when I quit of shredded Provel and brought it home.
Beautiful. Okay. I needed to hear that. You have vindicated me. Alright, so last question. You're writing a novel, okay? And 3 of your characters have to be based off real life people, okay? In Chi Alpha. Now, one of them obviously is going to be me because of, my large personality. So obviously you would need me in your novel.
Mm-hmm.
Who are 2 other people in Chi Alpha that you put in your novel, and why?
Well, first I would choose Kenny, probably because I've known him the longest. I could probably write a realistic Kenny. And also,
you gotta have Kenny in it. Agreed.
Because he's an intellectual, and he's thoughtful, and he can make an interesting character. And then I would pick Mark, because he's funny, and he can bring a little bit of comedy to the novel.
Let me tell you, I would read that novel. A novel with Kenny and Mark, absolutely. Okay, well, Grant, it's been great to introduce you to everyone. Everyone, this is Grant. I'm Mercer, and we will see you next week for another Meet at Chi Alpha.
Hey everybody, welcome back to our final Thursday of the semester. Glad that you're with us tonight. Glad to be speaking with you and wrapping up what was an unusual, but I think a fruitful and productive fall semester to our year. I want to talk to you just real briefly about what you can expect coming up. We're going to keep these Thursday night videos, but we're going to have kind of a shortened, condensed version of them moving forward. So after Thanksgiving, for 3 weeks, we're going to have like a 10 to 12 minute devotional that we're going to send out on Thursday nights. The first one's going to be by me, the second one by Amber, but then we're going to have some students within the group who are going to be in charge of sharing the devotionals for those particular Thursdays as we get back to the campus at the late January. So it'll be about 6 weeks of these, 3 before Christmas, 3 after Christmas, and we'll be in touch about those things. Secondly is over the break, Amber and I are going to start working on a discipleship class. If you're interested in just kind of being involved in an online kind of virtual discipleship class in the spring, we'd love to hear from you, or maybe just keep that on your radar as we kind of work on it and figure out what that's going to look like. We'll pass that along to you. But just so you know that something in the spring is going to come forward to where you can learn more about what discipleship means and why it's the heartbeat of Chi Alpha as you're involved both on campus and maybe in stuff that you're involved with at home. Lastly is that freshman dinners. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on in this video. But freshman dinners are something that we want to start up in the spring so that those of you who are brand new to campus can start getting to know each other. And so we're going to start figuring out how to facilitate those coming up in the spring. But what I want to do tonight is one of the things that I feel like we've lost this semester is that because of all of the restrictions, we've lost our sense of being deeply in community. That there is far more going on in Chi Alpha than just the small group that you might be a part of. And so I want to talk about community. I want us to remind ourselves of community. And I want to share with some of you, maybe who are newer to the group, about some stories about what God has done since we've gotten here in different attributes of SLU Chi Alpha that really hit on community. Because being together communally, all as one, not just in small groups, is what we've lost this semester. And there's so many powerful things that happen when we all come together in community. And I want to just touch on a few of those. But my idea of community, or at least some of the key passages that touch on community, come from the Gospel of John and then the book of Acts. So I want to read for you this passage in John in chapter 13, 34 and 35, where he's talking to his disciples, and this is right after he's washed his feet, he's had his last meal with them, he's talked to them about the gospel, that this is what my life essentially is going to mean when it's all said and done. You'll look back at this moment and recognize that it is my body and blood that is the core of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And right on the tail end of that, he says something phenomenal. This is what he says. In John chapter 13, 34 and 35, Jesus says, a new command I give you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are to also love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. What I love about that passage is that it goes so far against everything that I feel like I learned growing up as a Christian. I grew up in a Christian household, going to church, all of those things, but I always thought that if you want people to know who Jesus is, you throw on a really slick program, you have a really catchy way of talking about the gospel with your friends, that you're really polished, that you're a salesman, that this is how people find out about who it is that Jesus is. And while those things aren't bad in of themselves, when I read this later on after I had become a real follower of Christ, I was like, wait a second, that is so different. People will know who Jesus is by the way that we treat each other. And then I started to recognize that that was part of my own experience. When I went to college and got involved in Chi Alpha, the way that I knew that people were serious about Jesus was how they treated each other. The fruit of their relationship with Jesus manifested itself in the way that they loved and treated one another. And that just drew me in because I wanted to know the source behind why they did the things that they did, and what was the passion behind how they treated one another. One of the first mission trips I ever went on, one of the things that we noticed is that the kids that were around in northern Scotland were coming to know Jesus because they said, we see the kinds of relationships you have with each other, the way you love one another, and we're drawn into that. It's counterproductive, but the very source of our community in SLU Chi Alpha and beyond is one of the key attributes about how anybody is going to come to know Jesus. And so community is not just something that we do, it's something that we are supposed to be deeply committed to, deeply invested in. Community is vitally important. Now let me read to you another passage in the book of Acts that deals more with kind of the fruit of what it looked like once the disciples really built a community that was built on loving one another the way Jesus had loved them, surrounding themselves around the gospel. This is what it says in Acts chapter 2, 42 through 48. Here's how it reads. It says, And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles, and all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day after day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And get this, and the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. You hear what's happening? They had worship. They had fellowship. They had worship services where people would come and listen to the gospel, to the teachings of Scripture, to the apostles' teachings. They had generosity. They had outreach. They had care and concern for one another. And in the midst of their love and devotion to Jesus and to one another, the Lord added to their number every day. Community is not just an attribute of the Christian life. It is one of the primary, if not the primary vehicle by which Jesus expresses to the world around us what the gospel is, what it looks like. This isn't just some kind of program that they put into motion. These aren't people who are being forced to sell their goods to give to those in the community who have need. This is their response to the gospel that Jesus made himself a sacrifice on our behalf. It came down to be nothing. In his generosity, gave him of himself completely over to our needs. Now, in response to that, I'm going to do that for my brother and sister in this new family of God. Community is at the core of what it means to know Jesus and follow Jesus, and by the way in which other people will then come to know and follow Jesus. Community is huge. It's the one thing that I feel like I'm missing the most this semester. I'm grieving over the most this semester. I mean, we would normally be having a Christmas party right about now when people would dress up and we'd have snowballs that we'd throw around the room and really good food and fun times and pictures and all that kind of stuff. We're missing that this year. And it's so sad to me because something happens when we are all together in a sense of community. But all is not lost, because the core of community starts not only with your personal devotion to Christ, but with a small group. And I'll get to that in a second. But let me share with you some stories of the kinds of things that have happened because of community at SLU Chi Alpha throughout the years. I can't get to all of them. This is just literally the tip of the iceberg. This is just a small sampling size of the things that God has done year after year after year that we've been here over the last 8 years. I want to tell you about a guy named Ray Chen. Ray Chen came here, I believe it was back in 2014, 2000, somewhere around there, 15 maybe. And he was a graduate student. He would be here for a few years. He was a grad student and an RA in economics, if I'm not mistaken. And Ray Chen was from China. Ray Chen loved to cook food for people. He was an RA in Marquette, and we had a couple guys who lived on the floor in Marquette, and he would cook food for them and get to know them. And these few guys ended up being a part of a Chi Alpha small group. And over time, they started telling me about the international student that was their RA on their floor named Ray. And he said he's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God. He's very outspoken about that. He's from China, but he's a really nice guy, and he loves to cook food for people. He's very hospitable. And Ray's the kind of person that just knows everybody. He just kind of goes around and meets everybody and anybody, and he's very hospitable. He's very engaged in other people's lives. And Ray became friends with these guys on his floor who ended up being a part of a Chi Alpha small group. Now, over the semesters, over the year and a half, when we first started to get to know Ray, he would show up in and out of Chi Alpha, mostly coming to small groups, being a part of the discussion, being a part of the community. He would always show up with chips or something for people to eat, because he had a way of always people giving him food when he was out and about. He was a great mooch. And so Ray was just a fantastic guy, just really amazing in so many different ways. And he started to open up his heart semester after semester to the idea of Jesus. Well, it was a regional Chi Alpha conference in January of, I think, 2018, maybe 17. I can't remember my years very well. And Ray decided to come, and another girl decided to come, and she was brand new to Chi Alpha. She didn't hardly anybody know anybody. She's only about a couple weeks into Chi Alpha, and she decided to come, and it was in January. It was in another state. I think it was in Lincoln, Nebraska that year. It might have been in Iowa. I can't remember. But we went there, and after the first night, Friday night, the very first service, at the end of that message, the person speaking said, if you've never given your life to Jesus, if you want to do that, I want you to raise your hand. And this girl, Kelly, who was brand new to Chi Alpha, and Ray Chen raised their hand. And Ray Chen then heard later on, by the way, this weekend we're going to be baptizing people who have never been baptized. If you've never been baptized before and you want to be, we can do it at this hotel in the pool. And Ray was like, I'm ready to be baptized. I gave my life to Jesus, now let's go get baptized. And his small group leader, a guy named Alec, who was giving a year after graduation to being on staff with Chi Alpha, baptized Ray in the pool at the hotel during the conference that he gave his life to Jesus. It was a couple of Chi Alpha retreats later, and Ray was getting ready to go back to China. And I said, Ray, I want you to get up and just share whatever's on your heart. I want you to talk to us before you leave. I want you to share with us your story. And he got up there and he just started talking about his love for Jesus and how it was the community of Chi Alpha that reached out to an international student named Ray Chen that changed his life forever. Now let me tell you something. Ray eventually sent us a picture. I'll put it up in a second. He sent us a picture. He said, I went back to China, and I want to show you this picture of these students that I found who I am teaching about discipleship, because that's what I learned in being a part of SLU Chi Alpha. And he sent us this picture, and it was a picture of Ray sitting with a group of people in a country that is closed to Christians sharing the gospel publicly, teaching them about Jesus and about discipleship and following Jesus. Isn't that an amazing story? It happened not because we had a slick program, not because we had a kind of a survey we handed out that kind of drew people into discussion and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't a slick program. I don't have any problem with programs. It was ultimately the community of the people of God that drew Ray Chen into who we were and knowing Jesus. I was just an awesome, we have multiple stories like that. It's really just, I don't want to share all of them because they're not really my story to tell. But if you just start asking around, ask your small group leaders, what was your story in coming to Chi Alpha? Listen to what they say. Feel the impact of what it means to be a part of a community who loves and follows Jesus. A couple of years ago, I think 3 years ago, we went on our very first missions trip to Mexico to work with an organization called Casa por Cristo. Casa por Cristo is an organization that builds homes for people in other countries, primarily in Mexico right now, but I think they're in 3 and 4 now. They just built their 6,000th house, and they build these houses in 4 days, and they've been doing it since 1993, and it's basically for people who literally don't have a place to live. So they build houses for people who don't have a place to live, but they build houses in connection to a local church so that the people for whom they're building a house for have a local church and congregation and community through which they can now be connected. Now, some of them know Jesus, some of them don't. But we went on our very first trip. There were 14 of us. We went down to Juarez, Mexico, and we built a house in 4 days, and it was a phenomenal experience. We had such great experiences that one of the favorite ones that we had on that trip was on our way down is somewhere in Oklahoma, between Oklahoma City and the next place that we were going to on our trip down to El Paso, Texas, and ultimately into Juarez, is that the outer layer of the van that we were driving, the outer layer of the front tire exploded. And then all of a sudden we had to pull over, change the tire, figure out how to change the tire on this gigantic, 15-passenger van that none of us have ever changed a tire on. And so while I think 6 of us are on the side of the road trying to figure out how to fix this tire on this old van, I find out that another one of our students named Kendall Robinson has leading the rest of the students in some Christian worship yoga that she had just described, which was funny in and of itself that I found out later. But that whole 2 to 3 hour experience on the side of the road, figuring out how to fix this van so we can keep on going on our trip, and people just playing different games or doing exercises on the side of the road, it made such a unique mark on their experience. Why? Because it was a community experience. Oh no, we've got a problem. Let's fix it out. Let's fix it together. Well, on the course of the trip, we built a home for this family. They have 2 young kids. It's such a moving experience. We handed them the keys. We said, we're going to pray for you, bless you. We're so glad that we're able to build this house for you. It's a three-room house with full, drywall, electricity, everything. The people at Casa por Cristo have just completely mastered the ability to build these homes from the ground up in the course of 4 days. And here's the thing, though. That trip not only was a great service opportunity, but it was an extremely helpful community opportunity. And the people on that trip came back, and the experience and depth of relationship they built with each other in community, in that little small group of 14, if you will, changed and influenced the rest of the group. They said, oh man, you wouldn't believe what we experienced. You wouldn't believe what we did. It infused a passion for service and Jesus into the overall community. And here's my encouragement. The greatest thing that you can do for the community of St. Louis University Chi Alpha, and ultimately for the entire community of St. Louis University as a whole, is to be deeply committed to your small group. Because the closer you are to the people in your small group, the more that love and devotion to one another will infuse itself into the entirety of Chi Alpha when we are allowed to come back together and worship in person. Let me just give you one more thing. For those of you who are new, a few years ago, about 4 years ago, when the current seniors were freshmen, a number of us sat down, the freshman students at the time sat down, and we had this huge list of all these freshmen that had shown some kind of interest in Chi Alpha throughout the year. And they said, let's get a hold of all these people, and let's just set up a once-a-week dinner where freshmen from Chi Alpha can get together and sit down and start to get to know one another. I remember one student in particular, she's a senior now, telling me, I was in a small group with only one other freshman girl, and I thought that we might have been the only freshmen in all of Chi Alpha. And then I started coming to these freshman dinners, and I started recognizing that I wasn't the only one. And instead of having her primary relationship with her small group leader, her relationships began to move into her peers, into the other freshmen who were a part of SLU Chi Alpha. And they started having these dinners that would grow and be more influential and more impactful. To this day, some of them believe that the freshman dinners were the primary means by which they experienced true community on campus and in Chi Alpha. So we're going to try to figure out how to arrange and get freshman dinners started in the spring so that you can be on a campus where you know the other people who are involved in SLU Chi Alpha so that you can have a sense of camaraderie throughout all of your years of school. I'm telling you, there are so many people who have graduated with a wealth of knowledge, but also a wealth of relationships because they decided to commit to the idea of community with other people who are walking with Jesus on campus. Let me just encourage you with this. I know we're about to go into the break. I know you're about to finish off your finals and all that kind of stuff. You have this huge opportunity while everybody is home and everybody can still connect via technology. Don't lose sight of your small group. Don't lose sight of the relationships that you've sown into and that you've built and that you've learned so far since being on campus. It's just, for some of you, you're just only one semester into this ride, into this journey. Allow us to journey with you. Just begin to connect with those who lead small groups. Just connect with other people that you've met in your small groups that you just really feel an affinity to. Allow community to be built from the ground up, because that is how it's done. Think about what Jesus said. They will know you are my disciples by how you love one another. He said, if you 12 would learn how to love each other so deeply, the people around you will begin to catch on to who I am, and it'll just grow out further and further and further until now all of a sudden you have a community that is much larger than what any one person could ever produce. So I'm rooting for community in Chi Alpha through the individual relationships that you've made this semester. Never discount the power and the authority and the love and the devotion and the joy that comes from having a group of people who follow Jesus with you while you're in college. So I'm signing off for this semester. After starting December 3rd, we'll start doing these 10 to 12 minute devotionals. But I love you guys. I'm praying for you. I'm rooting for you. Good job this semester. We made it. We made it the entire semester, which was better than I thought we'd make, and just people being able to stay on campus and learn in person. And just really proud of what you guys have done. And I look forward to next semester being with you some more. So if you need anything, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. And I look forward to next time. All right. Bye. God bless.